Alright everybody, welcome to another episode of Completion Critiques. Doing something a little bit differently with kind of recording slash streaming a little intro before these parts get cut up. So if you're new, each week we review the completion and achievement rates of games to see what we can learn about how player motivation and player behavior dictated whether or not this game really succeeded among its fans. And I'm setting up for the Patreon for people to vote for which episodes I'd like to see in what order. So for this week, it is Resident Evil 7 and Doom 2016, the Battle of the Soft Boots. And if you'd like to catch these shows live, we do them Tuesdays starting around 4:30 ET. But with that, let's get to the games this week. With that, let's turn to RE7. This is the one that I'm kind of more interested in. RE7, of course, is not only the soft reboot of the Resident Evil franchise, it's also just a complete change in terms of what Resident Evil was for the longest time. And I remember personally not really caring about RE7 when it was first announced. I thought, oh, they're just going to rip off Amnesia or Outlast and call it a day. But as word of mouth began to spread and some really great demos and marketing that Capcom did, people got excited about it. Now, as an interesting point, fewer people reviewed Resident Evil than they did Doom. And let me just bring that back up really fast. Yeah, almost 98,000 reviews of Doom compared to just over 33,000 reviews for Resident Evil 7. But one of the points about the show is that we care about the consumer base, not so much about the number of people who bought it. Well, unless we're talking about a game that only got like 20 sales, then that's a different story. So let us take a look and see if the reboot of a franchise that was already part of a niche genre actually succeeded. And before we do that, as an interesting aside, I just want to see really fast. Did Resident Evil 6 get more reviews? No. So we know already that 7 did beat out 6 in terms of that regard. Yep, and I do agree with Foreign there. And unfortunately, that is one limitation of the show, is that we can only look at it on games and on platforms that we get full, clear, and achievement rates on. And I don't know if anyone could actually check into this for me, or maybe I'll do this after the show, if there's an easy way to spot clear rates on the PlayStation 4 or 5 or whatever. Because if it is, we could pull them into it. So, on the positive side, at least more of the fan base cleared the opening mission compared to Doom. Or a little bit more, actually. So, 83.7. Actually, wait a minute. 84? No, I think that's like almost like even with Doom. Hold on. That would be funny if 83.8. Okay, so literally Doom was 0.1% more people beat the opening map of Doom than they did Resident Evil 7. Obtain some by closely examining. And again, like, these are things you're going to just do by starting the game and playing it. So we go from 83. Close a door as an achievement. Nice. Then we go to 74. 73. Complete the Mia. So it's looking like, however, that there is more churn to RE7 than there was at Doom. As we go from 73 to 70, and then we go down to 62. And these are just kind of like bonus achievements. They're not really progress. Maybe can't catch me. You ain't getting away. So really, if I wanted to be friendly or nice, we could say 62.6%. If we wanted to be technical, it would be 60% as a stabilization, because this is a major progression achievement. That is clearing the entire... I know, that's kind of scary there. Because, I mean, if you're playing as Ethan All Hands Winters, you're going to be blocking a lot in that game. Master unlocking. So, what did I say with Doom? I said it had 58. Oh no, I think I said 62. So I did include that. So to be fair, we will say 63% of stabilize, which would be 37% churn. Still relatively high stabilization. And like I said, if it's above 60, I would say that's okay. We would like stabilization to be maybe 70 to 80%. So we keep going down in the bag. Unlock the secret in the old house. So that would have been... I think that's a Marjorie level, or the first Marjorie fight. And then 50%. Now, here's something that's a little interesting. These two achievements are very widely spaced in terms of where they are in the game. If you're going to beat this, you then have to go back into the normal house, get the 2 keys, and then go... If you're escaping the Baker family home, that would be beating the Jack fight all the way there. Now, one thing that I do find that's very interesting, once it's stabilized, you can see that there is very little drop-off as we go down. Like, going from 61.8 to 60.3, like, that is really damn good. 60.3 to 60.1. Like, if you can go from, like, tenths of percentages down in terms of churn, your game is doing really fantastic. I'm also surprised, honestly, so many people got through the ship. Because the ship section is a pain. And I really don't like that section in terms of getting through it. But there are a few things to keep in mind. Resident Evil 7 came before Resident Evil 8. So people wanted to see this game all the way through. And this is actually, I think, really stand out from RE7. That despite, the annoyance of the ship and getting through it, they only lost 6/10 more people to then see the game all the way through. Now, end of the night, I believe... I don't recognize that achievement. That could be from one of the DLCs. So, what we can say, however, is that 47% of the player base, or 47%, made it through the game all the way. And if we divide 47 by 63, we get rounded up 75% of the fan base clearing RE7, and that is fantastic. I would say anything higher than like 60 is really damn good. So again, what that tells us is that the game did lose 37% of the people who bought the game. But those who stuck with it, who I'm assuming are predominantly Resident Evil and survival horror fans, really kept playing it. And to have a core base of 75% meant that despite the issues, Capcom definitely did something right with RE7. Now, what is interesting to note again is that this is for clearing the game on easy. So what that tells me is that a lot of people really didn't want to play this on, or they really want to just focus more on the story rather than the challenge of the game. And then, of course, that dropped down by 10% who cleared the game on normal. I believe these ending plus achievements were from the DLC. Now we keep going down. Complete Nigh Hero. So this was kind of the first major DLC that was released. And you can see quite a bit of a drop off, going from 37 to, we'll round this up to 19. And again, I think that is kind of the nature of like DLC and post-game support like that. That if you release content that takes place after the game is done, or you're expecting people to come back to a game, more often than not, they're probably not going to do it. But I would certainly put like this group into, the super fans, the ones who want to see everything. I'm surprised so few people actually tried this one. Four-hit combo, we have End of Zoe, Elite 21. And yeah, like these are again the bonus, the banned footage DLC. Get the true ending in Daughters. Now, this is what I did. Complete the game on Madhouse. And that was a whole lot of a challenge. But what I find interesting, that I really enjoyed Madhouse in terms of what they did with that difficulty. And unfortunately, it seems like only 6% of the player base actually managed to see what it had to offer. And when we look at RE8 at some point, we'll have to compare and contrast it with the Village of Shadows difficulty, because I felt that was worse design compared to Madhouse. Get all the files, get complete Happy Birthday. And yeah, you can see again that survival mode, and even like the survivors, like that kind of content, while it is enjoyable to play, not a lot of people of the overall fan base really want to do it. I would still like to see them do more of that mode, the raid mode, from Revelations 2. The Extreme Challenge, the Survival Plus. I don't think I did Ethan Must Die mode, so that was even more of a hardcore. Complete Nigh Hero. Professional, I think, was the harder mode out of that DLC. Again, S rank. And again, you can see just how few people actually cleared, the advanced achievements of post-game DLC. And I think if they do release DLC for RE8, we may see similar numbers of that, of people not really wanting to come back to a game they finished to see more content to it. But overall, what we can kind of glean from RE7 is that for being kind of the return to horror for Capcom and the franchise, it kept people going. While I don't think it was as much of a commercial success as I think Capcom wanted out of it, it still was critically well received, and as you can see by the fans, a lot of people who bought this game enjoyed it enough to see through it all the way to the end. And with a 75% core base, is really fantastic. But it is interesting to me, again, how so few people didn't even get like something like block an enemy attack. Like, we still had churn in that one, which is kind of funny. Destroy Mr. Everywhere statue. But if we kind of, again, count progress above all else, that 60% did manage to clear kind of the first quarter of the game. And that is seeing, all what the core gameplay has to offer, beating Jack both times. So that is really great. And again, once it stabilized, there really wasn't a lot of churn going forward. Maybe dropping down, 4% here, 3% there, and that is acceptable. What we don't want to see, again, is above, I would say, 7%, 10%, 20%, sometimes 60% churn, and that kind of thing. Watch all the videotapes, which I think this would be something that everyone who would be playing the game casually would have done. But what we can also see again, though, is that there is a benefit to heavy difficulty settings in games. And maybe even more so in horror games, where a lot of that experience is about getting scared and not, worrying about enemies two-shotting you. Which, if you're playing on Madhouse, the four-legged molded would have two-shot you on that difficulty if you didn't block right. And they were just nasty to fight. But again, we can see again, tracking these completion rates, that as it gets harder, less people are going to stick with the game. 47 to 37, and then from 37 all the way down to 6. But again, one of the things to keep in mind, excuse me, is that Madhouse is New Game Plus, or just New Game. You cannot start RE7 on Madhouse difficulty. You could, if you bought the DLC in RE8, start on Village of Shadows, but I would highly recommend against that, because you really need to understand the flow of the game and how things play out if you want to have a chance of beating it on that difficulty. As anyone who played RE8 like that can certainly attest to. We have Dead by Dawn, and again, these are just some of the bonus challenges, the additional DLC. And how many people beat End of Zoe? That's just complete non-terror, complete extreme challenge. Because if so few people beat, here it is, 10% beat End of Zoe, so that means only 10% saw the greatest moment when you picked up the power glove and started punching a molded with it, or power bombing the bosses in that DLC. And again, we can see where, when we look at Doom 2 Resident Evil, that when you have additional content that is separate from the core gameplay, fewer and fewer people are going willing to commit to it. In Resident Evil 7, it was survival mode in the DLC. In Doom 2016, it was the multiplayer and the creative play mode. So if we compare the two in terms of overall clear rates, let's see, where was it? Just saw it. Complete. Okay, here. So 33.7 beat Doom 2016. And I just lost it. Here it goes. 47% beat Resident Evil 7. So Resident Evil 7, in terms of success with its player base, was higher than Doom. And again, I think part of that is also the gameplay loop. Doom is far more strenuous to play compared to Resident Evil 7. Both games, though, did really well. And again, this was to be expected because they both got sequels. And ultimately, to begin to wrap up this week's kind of double episode, that both games, in terms of being soft reboots, resonated with new and returning fans, and were able to modernize the gameplay while cutting out some of the elements that didn't work. With Doom 2016, the introduction of the glory kill system, and just kind of getting back to that older, more arcade-like gameplay worked with them. While with Resident Evil 7, kind of borrowing a page or a lot from Amnesia and Outlast with the first-person perspective, slower-paced design, brought back a lot of people who were put off by the more action-heavy, Resident Evil 5 and 6 design. And as we've said, as a spoiler alert, this would also carry through to Doom Eternal and Resident Evil 8, that when we cover them, probably in a year's time, we'll be able to see just how much of the fan base retained. Because one of the things that's very interesting is that when we look at sequels, that oftentimes sequels have less churn and higher stabilization, because you're kind of bringing all the people who bought the first game back, and they're more, accustomed to the challenges of that franchise. But I think with that, we'll wrap up this week's stream. Again, these are meant to be shorter streams, and we picked two very interesting games. So I'd like to thank everybody who watched these either live or recorded. If you'd like to vote for what will be the next stream / double or next two games for me to cover, be sure to check out our Patreon link down below, as anyone who supports the channel will be able to put a vote to it. Be sure to join our Discord if you'd like to continue these discussions. And like I said, if you want to watch these shows live, I do them Tuesdays starting around 4:30 p.m. ET here on the channel. Do all the liking, smashing, licking, whatever you want to do with all the buttons here. And come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until our next show, everybody, take care.